A North Korean submarine surfaced 200 miles off the coast of Japan in October 2024. It stayed on the surface for 36 hours. U.S. satellites tracked it. Japanese maritime forces tried to follow it, then it submerged and disappeared. Intelligence analysts reviewed the photos, and their assessment was unanimous. This submarine carries weapons that can reach Tokyo in 4 minutes, and there's no reliable way to stop them. The submarine is designated Hero Kim-kun OK by South Korean intelligence. It's 83 meters long, displaces 3,000 tons, and represents the most significant advancement in North Korean military capability in decades. But the submarine itself isn't what has U.S. Pacific Command worried. It's what the submarine carries. 2 to 3 vertical launch tubes designed for submarine-launched ballistic missiles with nuclear warheads, estimated between 100 and 300 kilotons. That's 7 to 20 times more powerful than Hiroshima. Here's why this changes everything about Pacific security. North Korea now has a mobile nuclear deterrent that's nearly impossible to track and even harder to destroy. Every previous North Korean missile was land-based and targetable. This submarine can hide anywhere in 1,000,000 square kilometers of ocean and launch with minimal warning. The U.S. called it terrifying because terrifying is the diplomatic word for we have no good answer to this threat. Before we break down what this specific submarine can do, you need to understand why ballistic missile submarines are considered the most dangerous weapons ever created. It's not just that they carry nuclear weapons. Aircraft can carry nuclear weapons. ICBMs can carry nuclear weapons, but submarines can carry nuclear weapons while being functionally invisible until the moment they launch. A surface ship shows up on radar from 200 miles away. Satellites can photograph it from space. Aircraft can spot it visually. But a submarine 300 feet underwater is invisible to all of these detection methods. The only way to find it is active sonar, and you need to be within 10 to 30 miles depending on ocean conditions. The Pacific Ocean is 165 million square kilometers. Finding one submarine is mathematically impossible without knowing roughly where it is. But here's what makes it catastrophic for missile defense. Land-based missiles are visible to satellites the moment they launch. This gives defenders 10 to 15 minutes of warning to calculate trajectories and attempt intercepts. Submarine-launched missiles from 500 kilometers offshore give 4 to 6 minutes of warning. That's less time than it takes to evacuate a single building, let alone a city. The entire U.S. missile defense system is designed around having enough warning time to track, calculate, and intercept. Submarine launches from close range eliminate that time buffer. By the time radar detects the missile, it's already halfway to the target. The interceptor missiles don't have time to reach intercept altitude. The mathematical window for successful defense closes before defense systems can even respond. This is why the US, Russia, China, UK, and France all consider ballistic missile submarines their most important nuclear asset. They're survivable, mobile, and nearly undetectable. North Korea just joined that club. That's why the Pentagon used the word terrifying in classified briefings. The Hero Kim-kun OK-class submarine is estimated to carry 2 to 3 Pukguksong-4 or Pukguksong-5 submarine-launched ballistic missiles. These are solid-fuel, two-stage missiles with an estimated range of 2,000 to 2,500 kilometers. That range number is critical because it determines what targets the submarine can hit from what positions. From a launch position in the Sea of Japan, 500 kilometers from the Japanese coast, this submarine can strike Tokyo in 5 to 6 minutes, Osaka in 6 to 7 minutes, U.S. Naval Base Yokosuka in 5 minutes, U.S. Air Force Base Misawa in 4 minutes, Seoul in 6 minutes, and Busan in 5 minutes. Those flight times are faster than any missile defense system can reliably intercept. But here's the weapon that has analysts most concerned. Each missile carries a nuclear warhead with an estimated yield between 100 and 300 kilotons. North Korea has tested devices in this yield range multiple times. They have demonstrated the ability to miniaturize warheads to fit on ballistic missiles. The assumption that they can't build submarine-launched nuclear missiles is no longer valid. They demonstrated the capability by deploying this submarine. A 150-kiloton warhead detonated over central Tokyo would create a fireball 1.5 kilometers in diameter where everything is vaporized instantly. Thermal radiation would cause third-degree burns up to 9 kilometers from ground zero. Blast waves would collapse buildings and kill everyone within 6 kilometers. Radiation would cause acute sickness up to 4 kilometers from detonation. The immediate death toll would be 5,000 to 1 million people. Total casualties would reach 2 to 3 million, and the submarine could deliver this with 4 to 6 minutes of warning. Not enough time to evacuate. Not enough time for reliable intercept. Not enough time to do anything except watch the missile arc toward the target and hope the warhead is conventional instead of nuclear. You might think modern technology can track submarines easily. Satellites, sonar networks, underwater sensors, constant patrols. But the reality is far more complicated and far less reassuring than the public believes. The Sea of Japan, where this submarine operates, is a nightmare environment for submarine detection. Average depth is only 1,600 meters, which creates complex acoustic conditions. Thermal layers at different depths bend sonar waves unpredictably. Heavy commercial shipping traffic creates constant background noise. Fishing fleets operate throughout the area 24/7. Rock formations on the seafloor create acoustic shadows where submarines can hide. Here's what happened when Japan tried to track this submarine. They knew roughly where it surfaced. They had maritime patrol aircraft with sonobuoys deployed within hours. They had submarines searching the area. Within 36 hours of the North Korean submarine submerging, Japan had lost track of it completely. Not because their technology failed, because finding submarines in that environment is extraordinarily difficult, even when you know the general area. The acoustic signature of this submarine is classified but estimated to be significantly quieter than previous North Korean designs. It's still noisier than modern Russian or Chinese submarines. It doesn't need to be silent like American nuclear submarines. It only needs to be quiet enough to avoid detection in the specific environment where it operates. Based on the fact that Japan lost it within 36 hours, it's quiet enough. But here's the mathematical problem that makes this unsolvable. The Sea of Japan is roughly 1 million square kilometers. A maritime patrol aircraft with sonobuoys can effectively search maybe 1,000 square kilometers per sortie. That means you'd need 1,000 aircraft sorties to search the entire area once. While you're searching, the submarine is moving. By the time you've searched the entire area, the submarine could be back in zones you already checked. The only reliable way to track submarines is with other submarines maintaining constant contact. The U.S. operates attack submarines specifically for this mission. But North Korea only needs one submarine to create problems. The U.S. would need to dedicate multiple attack submarines to tracking it continuously. That's submarines that can't be used for other missions, and North Korea is building more of these submarines. The resource requirements for tracking them all simultaneously become impossible. For decades, North Korea's nuclear deterrent was entirely land-based. Missiles on mobile launchers that drove around trying to hide from satellites. Underground launch facilities that were mapped and targetable. Nuclear weapons stored in known facilities that could theoretically be destroyed in a first strike. Here's why submarines change that calculation completely. The entire concept of a preemptive strike against North Korea assumed the U.S. could locate and destroy most North Korean nuclear assets before they could be used. Massive airstrikes hitting hundreds of targets simultaneously. Cruise missiles taking out mobile launchers. Special forces securing nuclear storage sites. Hit them so hard and so fast that their nuclear capability is eliminated before they can respond. That plan is now obsolete. You can't destroy a submarine you can't find. Even if the U.S. destroyed every land-based North Korean missile, every nuclear facility, every military base, this submarine would survive. And the submarine has enough firepower to kill millions of people in Japan or South Korea in retaliation. This is called a secure second strike capability. Even if North Korea is hit first, they can still hit back. This is what makes nuclear deterrence stable or unstable depending on your perspective. Stable because North Korea is less likely to be attacked. Unstable because North Korea now has less incentive to negotiate denuclearization. But here's what terrifies military planners about escalation scenarios. In a crisis, every unidentified submarine contact becomes a potential nuclear threat. Allied forces have to treat every submarine they detect as possibly carrying nuclear weapons. This creates enormous pressure to attack submarines preemptively before they can launch. But attacking a North Korean submarine could trigger exactly the nuclear response you were trying to prevent. The scenarios get worse rapidly. North Korea keeps the submarine at sea during a crisis. U.S. and Japanese forces search for it aggressively. Someone detects something that might be the submarine. Do you attack it without confirmation and risk triggering nuclear war? Do you wait for confirmation and risk the submarine launching first? There are no good options. Every choice is bad. That's why the assessment is terrifying. The submarine and missiles are hardware problems, difficult but theoretically solvable with enough resources. The real problem is strategic and has no technical solution. Here's the scenario that keeps Pentagon planners awake. North Korea conducts a nuclear test or missile launch that the U.S. considers unacceptable. The U.S. threatens military action. North Korea responds by deploying the submarine to sea. Now the U.S. faces an impossible choice. Attack North Korea knowing the submarine will survive and retaliate. Don't attack and accept that North Korea can act with impunity because the submarine makes military action too risky. This is nuclear blackmail made possible by submarines. North Korea can take provocative actions knowing the submarine creates enough uncertainty that the U.S. won't risk military escalation. Every North Korean provocation becomes a test of whether the U.S. values avoiding nuclear war more than enforcing red lines. But here's where it gets more complicated. Japan hosts 54000 U.S. troops. South Korea hosts 28500 U.S. troops. Major U.S. military bases at Yokosuka, Okinawa, and Camp Humphreys are all within range of this submarine. If North Korea threatens to use the submarine against these bases, does the U.S. evacuate? Does evacuation signal weakness that encourages more North Korean aggression? Does not evacuating put tens of thousands of U.S. service members at risk? These aren't theoretical problems. They're strategic dilemmas created by one submarine that cost North Korea maybe $500 million to build. The U.S. spends $800 billion per year on defense, and this $500 million submarine creates strategic problems that money can't solve. The submarine spotted in October 2024 is not the only one North Korea is building. Satellite imagery of Sinpo Naval Shipyard shows construction of at least 2 more submarines of similar size. South Korean intelligence estimates North Korea plans to build 5 to 10 of these submarines over the next decade. Here's what multiple submarines do to the detection problem. Tracking one submarine is extraordinarily difficult. Tracking 3 simultaneously is nearly impossible. Tracking 5 is completely impossible with current resources. The U.S. would need to dedicate a significant portion of its attack submarine fleet just to monitoring North Korean missile submarines. That's submarines that can't be used for operations in the South China Sea, Taiwan Strait, or anywhere else they're needed. The resource math becomes impossible. North Korea can build submarines for $500 million each. The U.S. has to dedicate multi-billion-dollar attack submarines, plus supporting aircraft and surface ships to track them. The cost ratio favors North Korea dramatically. They can proliferate faster than the U.S. can build tracking capability. But here's the worst-case scenario that's now possible. 5 North Korean submarines at sea simultaneously during a crisis. Each carrying 2 to 3 nuclear missiles, That's 10 to 15 nuclear weapons on mobile platforms that are nearly impossible to find. Even if the U.S. destroys every land-based North Korean missile, these submarines survive. The entire concept of preemptive strike becomes pointless because you can't eliminate the threat if you can't find the submarines. This is why every U.S. ally in the Pacific is accelerating anti-submarine warfare capabilities. Japan is building more submarines and maritime patrol aircraft. South Korea is expanding its anti-submarine warfare fleet. Australia is buying nuclear submarines specifically to counter this threat. Everyone is spending billions on capabilities to track submarines that may not even be trackable in the environments where they operate. The public statements from U.S. Pacific Command and the Pentagon use words like concerning, troubling, and terrifying. These are diplomatic euphemisms for, we don't have a good answer to this problem, and we're not sure we can develop one. Here's what they can't say out loud. Current missile defense systems are not reliable against submarine-launched missiles from close range. The geometry of intercept doesn't work when flight time is under 5 minutes. You can't intercept what you can't track in time. The systems were designed for ICBM threats with 20 to 30-minute flight times, not submarine launches with 4 to 6-minute flight times. The anti-submarine warfare capabilities needed to track multiple North Korean submarines simultaneously don't exist and won't exist for a decade, even with massive investment. The U.S. attack submarine fleet is already overstretched. Building more submarines takes 7 to 10 years. Training submarine crews takes 5 to 7 years. The capability gap exists now and will exist for years. But here's what really can't be said publicly. The U.S. extended deterrence promise to Japan and South Korea is based on the ability to defend them or retaliate on their behalf. If North Korean submarines can strike with minimal warning and the U.S. can't reliably defend against it, the credibility of that promise is undermined. If allies don't believe the U.S. can protect them, they might pursue their own nuclear weapons. Japan and South Korea both have the technical capability to build nuclear weapons within months if they chose to. This is the nightmare scenario. North Korean submarine capability triggers nuclear proliferation in South Korea and Japan. China responds by becoming more aggressive. The entire Pacific security architecture collapses because one small country deployed submarines that the system wasn't designed to counter. The Hero Kim Kun-ok submarine that surfaced in October disappeared and hasn't been reliably tracked since. It could be back in port. It could be operating somewhere in the Sea of Japan. It could be on the other side of the Pacific. Nobody knows for certain because tracking it continuously is impossible with available resources. This is the new normal for Pacific security. North Korean submarines carrying nuclear weapons operating in areas where they can strike with minimal warning. Allied forces searching constantly but unable to maintain continuous track. Every submarine contact treated as a potential nuclear threat. Every crisis heightened by the uncertainty of where the submarines are and what they're doing. The submarine spotted in October is just the first one. More are coming. Each one multiplies the tracking problem. Each one increases the strategic leverage North Korea has. Each one makes military options against North Korea more risky and diplomatic options less credible. The U.S. called the Payload terrifying because it is, not because the weapons are uniquely powerful. Because the platform carrying them is nearly impossible to find and almost impossible to stop. That's not a technical assessment. That's the strategic reality that will define Pacific security for the next decade.